Friends, good morning. It's great to be here. The sun is shining. Let me pray. Father, I thank you. I thank you for a new day, and I thank you that as we look at difficult topics, I do pray, Father, that we would know that these are not a surprise to you. This next generation and the things they're concerned about is not baffling to you. I thank you, Father, that you see all things. All of creation sits under your throne. And I do pray, Father, you would encourage us that over every issue in our homes, you proclaim, this is mine. Be gracious, I pray. Amen. Amen. We're at the business end. I've left these back at my tent, the handouts. I'll go and get them while I get you to talk about something near the beginning. So if you've not got one, it's fine, I'll get you one. But you'll follow through. It's not going to be complicated what we do. I've spent the first 2 days looking at identity and looking at something of what it is to lift our eyes from the immediate to the eternal. And a verse I've kept on returning to is this one here. 1 John 3 verse 1 says, "See what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God. And that is what we are. The reason the world does not know us is that it did not know him." And I've been arguing particularly that it is so helpful to see identity as a framework in so many of the conversations we're having. So many of the conversations we're having are about identity. The things that causes the tear, the rejection at school, the failure in a test, the not making it in a school team, the isolation a child feels, or the elation of scoring a goal. It is all about identity. It is all about answering the question, who am I and who does everyone else see me as? Now, just to clarify then, this verse says this issue of identity is at the heart of Christianity. I'm not making this up as a new methodology of a way of parenting. Christianity, from start to finish, is, who are you? In his great love, God says over us, you are a child of God, to trust in him. You could take it one step further back and say creation is God saying over us, you are mine because I've made you. So if you put it in sort of prodigal son terms, the son starts at home. The father looks out over his family and all he owns and says, this is mine. I own it. It has come from me. The son runs. When the son comes back, what he comes back to is, instead of may I be your servant, you are my son. You have come home. To be a Christian is before a belief or a morality or a habit on a Sunday or a way we speak or a difference in our family routines. It is identity. That is terrifically helpful because it means in the emotion of today, in the I have failed, or I have succeeded, or I am popular, or I have no friends, or I have been cast out, or I am the centre of attention. Throughout the ups and the downs, we have this is who we are. This is the foundation. Now, we started doing this sort of 4-year project on identity because it is the topic that's being talked about and questioned more than any other. So I just said in our first session, if I'd been born 100 years ago, I would have been a butcher's son. I come from a long line of butchers near Southampton. The shop is still there and Drew and Sons is still on the tiles at the back of the shop. My identity would have been very simple. Born as a butcher's son. Grow up to be a butcher with my brother. Retire, known forever in Romsey as he was the butcher. At the moment, we hear language of, be who you want to be. Find out your inner self. You can achieve whatever you want. There is a sense, and we're getting onto sexuality and gender, and these conversations equally are, who are you to tell me who I am? Or no one can stop you from being who you want to be. So these conversations are usually framed in terms of identity. So we're picking these harder topics, even if they're not the topics in your home, because maybe as a case study you can see, well, if these can handle the heat of our culture at the moment, they can handle the far more mundane topics of who should I invite to my party. Okay? Great. Let's get straight into gender. Gender. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. Okay, this verse here is identity. It's identity. God created mankind in his own image. Who are we? Who are we? We are image bearers. That is the first identity we're given in the Bible. We walk tall over all of creation. We take a deep breath. Right now you can say out loud, I'm an image bearer of the living God. Second identity. Would you have picked this as the second identity? Male and female, he created them. It is identity language. A friend of mine decided to do 4 sermons in church on gender and sex. And he started before the sermon started, parents were coming up to him saying, would it be okay if my over 11 joined us in these sermons these 4 weeks? He said, sure, absolutely. He said, by the time he started his first sermon, not one kid was still in youth group. Because the parents were saying, we're discussing this all the time. So, and we don't know what to say. So, he started his 4 sermons, the youth group were all in, he was delighted with it. He said his first thing he said was, put up your hand if you're clear male and female are different. And he put up his hand. Everyone put up their hand. He said, now, will you just write down on a piece of paper, how are men and women different? And he said, most people never even looked down at their piece of paper. They just looked up at it, eyes wide. Male and female, as 2 labels are clear. It is difficult to have the conversation after that. That's why it feels so difficult as a parent. Let me just give you some things we can say and talk about with our children that are clearer. Okay? I'll go through them if you can't read them. Firstly, talk about everything. Say the words. Say the words. I remember the conversation in a car that I had with my wife. In the book I've written, Raising Confident Kids, this is the page that apparently makes people laugh the most. We were driving past a field of cows on holiday. My kids were in the back, sort of under 7s. They started asking questions. They saw a bull getting overexcited in the field. I gripped the steering wheel a bit harder and stared dead ahead. And I had this conversation that in retrospect wasn't the ideal starting point for a Christian sexual ethic, that one bull is in a field of 100 girls and he has a fun summer. And during the conversation, in recent months, my wife and I had talked about what do we call our daughter's genitals. And I'd said, like Mary, I need some help. We're in the bath talking about it a lot. What are we going for? And she went away, talked to some friends, and she came back and said, front bottom egg. We're calling it a front bottom. And I said, seriously? And she said, yeah, it's what everyone's telling me. I said, okay. So we then found ourselves talking about cows and their front bottoms. And I just thought that everything about this isn't right. And I do remember, I wasn't going to make eye contact with Mary, but I wanted to shout, this is mad! Since then, on our podcast, we've had a number of medical professionals, including John, talk about everything, say the words, to avoid moments like this, where you get yourself into you're digging an ever deeper pit of like, what are we, cows with front bottoms? Talk about everything, say the words. So first of all, from the beginning, we just get to say penis out loud. We get to say vagina out loud. We get to say it in the bath. The reason for this, although it does feel like a sort of Englishman's worst test, the reality is also, our children then, what we're saying is this is all normal. This is all normal. So I've made it my goal since understanding this. I have to be less awkward about these things than my children are. I now have 2 teenagers. I am determined that I will keep going until, and I will ask, do you want to talk about this anymore? Rather than shutting a conversation down. So the goal is, the tone, the manner of these conversations is exactly the same as if you're talking about the football or what we're having for dinner. My children say, Dad, please, can you stop saying that? That's the goal. Secondly, every cell in your body has your gender or sex. Every cell in your body. So this is helpful. This is helpful to understand that medically, it is a total fallacy that a boy can be a girl or a girl can be a boy. Again, I didn't study enough in GCSE biology, so when I have guests on a podcast and I ask them these kind of questions, every single cell of your body. So what that means is we use the words male and female clearly and proudly and simply. It's not complicated, it's not confusing. Our boys are male and our girls are female, and it's without any doubt. So we're confident in that. Thirdly, the Bible offers beautiful freedom to boys and girls. So in the Bible, we have a woman who hammered a tent peg through a man's skull and is commended for it. The greatest poet in the Bible who danced in his underwear in public is King David. He was a dancer, he was a singer, he was a poet, he was proud. So I think, as I talk to Christians, there is often a sense of Christian girls should be girly girls and Christian boys should be manly boys. And we're not totally sure why, but there is a creeping sense. The Bible makes the Bible makes no commands on what a boy should be like, except a godly boy. What should a girl be like? She should be a godly girl. So therefore, to have godly male role models, that is the direction of travel we want to have, and that's why having multiple role models in a church is so helpful, because you do get to say to a little boy, even if he's not going to become like me, you know, which one? Which one? Which one of these men? Which one of these women? We can get to know them, we can understand them, we can ask them the difficult questions about the things our kids are into that make no sense to us. It's great to have gaming men in church, so we can understand what does godliness look like in gaming, what does godliness look like in sport, what does godliness look like in dance. We can work these things through. Now there are some trends in men and women. Men on average are physically stronger. Women on average are better communicators. So there are some trends we're going to see. And that leads to some obvious, you know, if our boys or our girls are following stereotypical trends, but that is different from they have to be those things. So the physically weaker boy needs to be shown how has God gifted him. What does godliness look like for a physically weaker boy? He will serve others in brilliant ways, just not by carrying large boxes. An incommunicative girl, what does it look like to be a godly woman who is less communicative or even less relational? There are ways to talk about these things. The truth about gender identity. Now this may not, we may not need this much, but it's just helpful because it's been talked about a lot, just to lay out something of the situation, that those people like John in the room who have studied these things and researched these things, so there are 2 big clumps of data around those boys who want to be girls and girls who want to be boys. The first clump of data is prepubescent boys. Little boys, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds pretend to be girls, put on mum's high heels, try on makeup, put on lipstick, put on her twin set and pearls and totter around the house. The data says this cohort of boys grow up to be men like any other. You know, nothing has gone wrong. There's a Friends episode about a little boy who keeps on wanting to play with dolls, and whenever he's not looking, he gets swapped with an Action Man. A sort of paranoia, like what if he keeps playing with dolls? The data says it's not a thing. It's not a thing. These boys just grow up. We don't have to be panicking, we don't have to be worrying. If our little boys, because of the world they're in at the moment, say, I want to grow up to be a woman, it's okay to give them a great big hug and say, I don't think that's going to happen, and you can explain a bit more about it. The second bundle of data is post-pubescent girls. There is a bundle of girls coming out of puberty, and there's a high correlation with those on the autistic spectrum. So they are struggling to make friends. They have a new adult female body that they're not that delighted with. It doesn't do the things they wish they could do with it. They've got a body they're not delighted with. They're struggling to make friends. They're mainly in their rooms. They're mainly online. They're struggling for real people to be in their conversation, in their life. They're listening to the internet. And a lie at the moment is if you become a man, these things will change and you'll be happier. Now, in the same way, the internet says if you harm yourself and make yourself bleed, you will be happier and it will relieve the pressure you feel. So what these young women need clearly is love and care and people to listen to them. And that is what the church has in abundance. That's what we do. We care for people. So the first thing to say is, to be a teenager is to be an extremely complicated, confusing time, where your brain has not developed yet to the point where you can understand consequences of what you do. So you're risk-taking and you're trying everything out and you're pushing away what you've learned as you've grown up. So church is the perfect place for teenagers. You know, it's one of those moments, which I would argue is the whole way through parenting, where you get to say to the parent and teenagers, you should come to church. Whatever you think of Jesus, it's a great place to come. People have honest conversations with your children. We talk about these things in youth groups. And clearly that means we do actually talk about these things in youth groups. And then finally, ask questions. Don't be afraid of not having all the answers. It's a piece of research that I hold tightly to, that if our children only hear their parents giving answers to every question, they fear they can't be a Christian because they don't have all the answers. So research says children have to hear their parents say, I don't know. Isn't that encouraging? Our children have to hear us say, I don't know, or that is difficult, or I find that hard to believe as well. We can admit what we are doubting in faith. We can admit what we would disagree with in faith if we were God. And we can even say, this is extremely complicated. Can I find someone else? Either I could talk to you about it, or I could even send you to an expert we've got in church. You know, all of these things are things we can grow up saying. And we can say it to a young kid, can't you? You know, 3 and 4 year olds, why? I literally, I don't know. And it's why parents so often find they're learning so much in answering kids' questions and finding out the answers. So we are not afraid of saying, I don't know. We're not afraid of questions. And we walk towards it. And we may have to do that thing of controlling our body language. You know, goodness, you've said some words there. Where exactly did you hear that in the playground? And, you know, you're just going to... My colleague Amy talks about having 100 little men running around her head. When one of her daughters came home and said, Mum, I think I've learnt to know I'm bisexual. And she said all 100 men were running around, and she just had to put down the knife she was holding as she was preparing dinner, and hold the edge of the kitchen unit. Just hold it tight and allow her 100 men just to stop running. I'll tell you later what the answer was. Body language under control. Thank you for telling me. You can say great things in these quite hard conversations. Thank you for telling me. That's really helpful. Where did you hear that? What are you thinking? Firstly, these questions matter, but it's also treading water conversationally, just to buy yourself some time from Okay. I'll go to my tent and get some handouts. Now, the question I'm asked most often is, at what age should I talk about? Fill in the topic here. And obviously the answer is, I don't know. Painful answer is probably about a year before your children want to talk about it. When's that going to be? I don't know. But so often we find ourselves saying, oh no, why can't we discuss this earlier? So it might be just sitting in a conversation where people are saying words like penis out loud. you're thinking to yourself, there is a conversation I should have had by now. Not too late, it's all fine. But maybe just, what is the next conversation? As we just sit here, even the fact you've come to this seminar today on difficult topics could be because there is a difficult topic. So is there a topic or a conversation that you come here thinking, I'm ready for that? And just tell the person next to you, or scribble it in the book on your own. And secondly, whatever the conversation is, and it doesn't have to be about bodies and sex. It could just be there is a topic that you have been putting off, that you would love to talk about, and the encouragement is to keep it normal, keep the tone normal. How could that conversation be made easier? Is there a place you go for good conversations? Do you have a dog? You take the dog for a walk. Is there a great place that has a Saturday breakfast, whether it's Tesco's, Asda, or a nice little coffee shop down the road? Is there a car journey you go on that lasts more than 10 minutes? Swimming each week. How would you make that conversation a bit easier, knowing the joy of being a parent is you've got another 10 years of this, at least, if not 50. So you do not have to fix this in one 10-minute conversation. So, for 4 minutes, what's the next conversation about any topic you'd love to have? And how could you make that conversation feel a little easier and a little more relaxed and a little less tense? Talk to the person next to you. I'll be back in 4 minutes.
Tell me where they are.
Sorry?
Yeah. Sorry?
That's what I do. Yeah, because it's very uncomfortable to talk to your daughter about that. I can't imagine talking to my daughter. Because she done well with daughters, she did. Sorry.
We've had a few conversations. Whereas the 7-year-old one, they're still young, right? Even at school, they've only had the introduction. But I mean, they know all the body parts.
One of the things my present age is my life. To make sure that there is no weirdness about this conversation, so yeah, so it's beautiful.
So we have we actually were.
Well, Sophia is at the age where, yeah, we actually somehow gently checking whether she's influenced by the she's 17. Well, all but obviously,
and I'm in charge of
secondary school, so she doesn't come to so possibly,
and I have to parents meetings. They're all concerned. They're all like a bit concerned about that. And then obviously they're delivering. That's training teachers. Science and pictures, videos, all the words, all this.
Insights, questions, disagreements, reinforcements. What are we thinking? Anything we're wondering? We don't need to, but we could be.
For me, I think mine. And I've got 2 teenagers, so we're just not very open to any initiating of that.
Absolutely. Thanks for saying that out loud.
Yeah. So I would love to have them, but I don't know. I just get shut down.
Okay. And if you don't mind me asking, you've made a mistake of saying something out loud. Can I just ask, do you think it's shut down because they find deeper conversations harder anyway, or do you think there's a Christian element in particular?
Other, and my boy more than my girl would talk deeply about stuff.
Okay.
If she,
Okay.
Great.
I mean, I think that's my experience too. I have a 16-year-old son. He's never said as few words as he does at the moment. I took him on a long walk for one of these conversations, and I just got to the end of our pathway, and our pathway is probably 5 steps. And I said to him, "We're going to have a long conversation now, Tom." And he said to me, "I hope you don't expect me to say anything." And I said, "Well, that's not technically a conversation. That's just a very long walk in a lecture. I'm not." And like the house was here, and this was the beginning of like 40 minutes.
Oh wow.
So that's the story. I went on the walk, and I would say the first 2 avenues conversationally walked down, he stopped and walked back out of. But I did find a way by about number 5 I caused him to think for the first time, and there are also things he said to me in all honesty about what he thought of the Christian view on this, and I thanked him for it. You know, as he was being brave by telling me, "No, this is the problem with what you're saying." So all of that, listening, being grateful for what you do get, while also they're just being a part of, there are just some things that matter so much. I'm your parent and I refuse to walk away from this. You know, in other words, it is a demonstration of love. I don't do this with every kid. I'm doing this with you because I couldn't love you more, and this matters. But I'm not, the fact that you're here means you're finding this difficult and I'm finding this difficult too. Thanks for saying that. Yeah.
I'm a bit past some of this, but is it not a point of just engaging in conversations with your children about sport or the actual getting used to talking?
So helpful. Absolutely.
As a background sort of, and then you would dig down maybe a bit.
Thanks so much. Yeah, there's an expert. The most common question I'm asked at sessions like this is, what do I do when my teenager has stopped talking to me? And the answer is, talk about anything. Where is their passion? Some teenagers, for some teenage years, it does feel like the passion has gone from most topics, but there is still something. There is still something that lights their fire, and they might want to talk about it at the time it's least convenient for you. But that is a word of an expert. Talk about anything. Show interest. Listen hard. Thanks so much.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, my son is quite happy to come and talk to me about most things.
Yeah.
Or anything. He'll just ask.
Yeah.
Right? But obviously, it's usually quite late at night because
Yeah.
the younger two, they're out of the way.
Yeah.
Is there like, at some point, should I like point him towards like uncles and stuff to talk to some things about?
Yeah.
When that's
Yeah.
not the person to talk to.
Thanks.
Because dad has a completely different opinion.
Yeah.
And like he already shuts his dad down. It's like, no, that's not a Christian. That's not as a Christian. I'm not gonna be doing that. Should I be pointing him towards uncles
Thanks so much.
and godparents?
Great.
Yeah.
I think the first thing to say is I do think it's your sort of right as a mum to talk about absolutely anything, and I do think for the same reason it would be helpful if they knew if your children grew up thinking mum could talk about anything, that would be a win. So even if in love you're thinking I wish there was a godly man, like as a first point it was mum was totally happy going there, like that would be brilliant. I think clearly to have some relationships with men you trust and they trust, that was an alternative for them. And maybe you could, you know, you'll be just great at instinctively knowing, like, is there a moment to say, you know, do you want to talk to Ian about this? You know, I think Ian would happily have a milkshake with you. So you get to offer some things that you feel comfortable with, and you just get to gauge, how does that land? And how much would they appreciate that? But I suspect you probably know that already. Keep going. Yes?
Can you say that I find this really encouraging?
Yeah.
Because as a boy,
Yeah.
my parents did loads of fun things together, loads
Yeah.
of sporty things, loads of outdoor things. We never communicated about anything that mattered, so I didn't have the skills as a youngster to do that. And when times got hard,
Yes.
then I didn't have those skills, and it really did get nasty.
Yeah.
So this is really encouraging. So I encourage you all to talk to your youngsters, you know, before it gets too difficult. It may be difficult now, but if you do it before it gets difficult, then they learn how to express themselves. They trust you,
Yes.
or even if it's not you, it's somebody else. Then it's just so important. So important.
It's so helpful, Rob. It is so helpful, and I've got a godly Christian dad who I think I'd even say couldn't, but certainly wasn't in the culture then to talk about these things. You hear a lot of peers saying books were slid under doors in the dead of night and things. And I think you're right. So we're first of all, we can be better than this. Like, the love we feel for our children is such that we would be pretty confused if we were saying sentences like, I don't think I could talk about that. Like, I find it difficult, I find it awkward, I don't know how to do it, I've never done it before. Those are all totally valid things to say. But I think we'd say, we'd love to try. And we also, I'm at the moment talking to various dads as I go through a few issues with my son. And it is striking that the conversation I have with them is very, very similar. We're all finding the same thing, that we can relate to what our 16, 17-year-olds growing up in churches are wanting to do, because we wanted to do it, and for the most part we did do it because we didn't have a dad who said, just pause a minute and let's just think through some things. And so there's an element of guilt in that, am I telling my kids not to do things that, like, or better, am I just talking to them a bit so that they can make some better decisions than I did? And I cannot, and then depending on our view on the issue, changes how much of an authority you want to be on it. Thanks. Yes.
Just to say, we went to a talk earlier this year with an organisation called Heart Matters. I can share the link with anyone that's interested, and they speak about these, like, how to communicate with your kids and technology, pornography, things like that. But some of the things that they said that could make conversation easier were drip conversations. So not like one big talk one time, but and also weaving it into life, like what you did with your son as you're going for a walk, and doing things side by side. So they were saying it can be quite intense sometimes. Sitting down having a conversation face to face, so like if you're cooking a meal together or you're doing something with your hands, they're saying sometimes that can make the conversation easier, like if kids doing some sort of, I don't know, craft or moulding, and as you're doing something side by side together, you're having these conversations that can make it easier too.
So helpful. Thank you. Yeah.
So, just reflecting the heart of every parent here, wanting to have these conversations.
Yeah.
My own experience being a slightly older dad, should we say, so that's my heart's cry for Joseph.
Yeah.
So we'll be able to have to do it. But my own experience, it might just help somebody in the room, was that my late dad was a scientist. He didn't have much emotional skill. I was born in the 70s, 80s. The church wasn't even talking about this stuff, full stop. But where I got this input was youth group. Sunday night after church, with parents who were not my parents.
Brilliant.
And they were superb because they didn't like dodge the topics. The boyfriend girlfriend thing was massive because we've got a big youth group. So I'm definitely not saying it's an alternative.
So helpful.
Because my heart's cry is the same as yours.
Right.
But at the same time, sometimes it may become some another context.
It's so helpful. So we're just saying here that youth group is such a great place for this to happen. The stats on what youth groups are talking about are quite depressing. So I'm absolutely delighted your experience of that. In other words, when you ask young people, when is pornography, when is sex, when is gender, when have relationships been talked about in your youth groups, the stats are a bit bleak. So we can make our churches better. But just a point on that, if you're sitting here as a parent of under 11s, then you get to say to a youth worker or a youth group, I'm happy to come into a group to talk about to other people's kids, because my kids aren't in the room, and it's more recent that I remember being their age, and I think I could do this. And there are so many organisations that are offering a basic structure of what to discuss, so that when your kids get to that age, you leave and you get someone else pushed into the door. So I mean, there are so many ways we can do this as a church. But we feel able to do it. So don't let this sort of Christian, who am I to talk about these? Like, if you love Jesus and you've walked this path and you've made some mistakes and you've got something to say about what you've understood is the better way, then please offer to be in the room. It would be so helpful. I'm moving on. Right, we're into friendship and sexuality. Genesis 2:18. The Lord God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I'll make a helper suitable for him." Before the fall, there was one thing that was not good, and that is being alone. Being alone is very, very difficult, and God changed it. And God gave a woman to a man. And there's a story there of marriage, but before the story of marriage, there's just a story of loneliness, and there's a story of needing intimate companionship. So before we talk about marriage, and because we're talking about parenting, we just get to say, our children need intimacy. They need care. They need people they're close to. Friendship. It's rare you come across a family who haven't known their kids to go through really, really difficult friendship issues. When I have this conversation in front of parents, it's quite rare there's not someone crying, particularly as I talk about my daughter's experience of friendship. I think for a lot of women that resonates as well. That I was fairly blind to that as a young man, not understanding how differently friendships work. I don't want to stereotype, but it is my observation that to be a girl going through school, I think is more relationally bruising than it is to be a boy going through school. So the first thing to understand is this is identity language. It's a statement of fact. It's not good to be alone. If our children are struggling without friends, it's because they're not made to be without friends. It is difficult. So the first thing is we can normalise that. And as parents we can acknowledge that. I don't meet parents who just want to be flippant about this and say, I don't know what friends are for. We get this. So a few things then we can say to our children. Firstly, friendship is essential, sex and marriage is not. So irrespective of the age of our children, we're starting from a place of we want friendships. And navigating friendships is extremely complicated. You know, if you've got a lot of friends, if your child has a lot of friends, it feels like they're sort of collecting marbles. You know, I've got 10 friends, and we invite 37 children to my party. You know, if that's our child's story, there's still some coaching to be done there about how do you make people feel. And like yesterday you had 21 friends, and today you've got 20, and who is it you just sort of flicked out of your group for the day? if your kid is fortunate enough to be blessed with that gift of friendship, and some kids have that gifting, then that is a powerful tool to use for the Lord in showing others how to love well and how to lead well, how to lead like Jesus, which is to care and to look out for the vulnerable rather than to gather the strong and the popular. But equally, if you have a child who struggles with friends, then we can't fix it, but we can try to search for where a friend might be found. Like, it's not uncommon that you might say, that parents say, like, but in my church, my child doesn't have anyone like them. Well, that's life. In my workplace, I don't have anyone like me, which is probably a good thing. And so, like, we very rarely meet people exactly like us. But part of friendship, in fact, the heart of friendship, the first friendship in the Bible is someone completely opposite, a man and a woman. God put together opposites because in diversity, you're forced to love more carefully. You're forced to think through. So the first thing is we're trying to help our children to know, how do we love someone who's different to us? That takes more listening, it takes more patience, it takes more perseverance, it's very difficult. It's a skill. Friendship is essential, sex and marriage is not. That's just to say, we follow a saviour king who never got married and never had sex. So therefore, marriage is not an essential part of life. And we do well not to give our children the impression that marriage is inevitable for them, or to give the impression of the people we invite into our homes that marriage is the only kind of friends we have or the only lifestyle we can commend. So we do just want to keep on working out who are the people who come to our home, who are the people that we are showing that friendship of difference to, how are we modelling, how do we be friends with people who are different to ourselves in every imaginable way. I do think Christians are brilliant at this. I do think Christians are brilliant at modelling. We love people who are different. Here, this room, what we're doing while we're here, we are modelling that. It's a great, children are not seeing this elsewhere. Children are not seeing this elsewhere. It is brilliant what we're doing as a church, what you're doing as a church. Early labelling of sexuality is not needed or helpful. I have a very good friend who is same-sex attracted. He is a church leader. He is not in a relationship. He doesn't plan to be in a sexual relationship. He writes books on this. He's very helpful on this. He was told at an early age that it's not helpful to announce to the world his sexuality, partly because it can change. Now, for him, it hasn't changed, but he's found it very helpful to be told as a young teenager it might change, because things that might change, you generally tend not to announce to the whole world. So just the fact it could change just means, why don't you keep this to yourself and the people who love you the most? We had a teenage girl at my church who said, I'm being put under pressure by my friends to come out as heterosexual. And I kind of, what? He said, well, everyone else in my year group, everyone knows their sexuality, but they don't know mine. And they think I'm heterosexual and they think I should tell everyone. And I was like, well, what are you going to do? Like, not like an adult normally means, like, I know the right answer, but what are you going to do? She said, well, I don't need anyone to know. I know, but I don't need anyone else in my school to know. And I was just in awe. What wisdom! Brilliant! I did manage to get myself together and say, well done. Absolutely great. But she has worked out who are the few people she trusts the most. What are the things that are most intimate to her? Well, she's got a very godly, loving, small group of people around her who she can be totally honest, and the people outside of that group, she doesn't have to tell them anything more. Brilliant. So just to encourage our children to choose what they talk about, particularly in this area, we don't need to have an elaborate coming out. Who will we listen to for answers to hard questions? In my family, I have a gay man married to another man, and it's been part of our family story for many, many years. So it just means that we've talked about that with our kids when they were tiny, and it's, in fact, they would kind of be confused to hear this because we've never had a choice and we always have, and it's a thing. But it also means I've been very aware I want to hug them when they come into my house like I hug other men who I'm close to. I want them in my house like other people get to be in my house. I want to show love to them because my kids are watching and my kids are going to remember. But my kids also know that we have a Christian sexual ethic, that one man marries one woman. And so we talk about that with our children, about how we love people who are different to us. And I think probably also, if I was writing the Bible, I probably wouldn't have written it quite like this, because it makes this part of our family life quite complicated and a bit annoying. But I'm not God, fortunately, so I go along with what God tells me. So it's probably in this place of friendship and sexuality, we're going to come across some conversations where we might find ourselves saying some things that we ourselves wouldn't naturally agree with. I hope at some point in our parenting we're saying things that we ourselves don't agree with. Because to be a Christian is fundamentally to obey someone else and to go to them for as your ultimate authority rather than your instincts or your heart on this. So there are some hard answers, but I just want to say also, let's not steer away from the topics. If we feel uncomfortable about a topic, if we're wrestling with a topic, at some point it's helpful for our kids to see we're wrestling with this as a topic. We don't have to tell them everything all at once. But in hard topics, we still have to, it's still good to talk about them, because there will be issues your children do not agree with in Christianity, and they're going to come at them far earlier than 10 years from now. They're probably wrestling with them already. And when they say, I don't want to go to church, you've met one of them. When they say, I don't want to have lunch with that family, you've met another of them. When they've said, why do you keep inviting them into this house, you've met another of them. When you've said church is very boring, can't we leave halfway? Can't we go to football instead of church? All of these are their big issues that they disagree with. So we are modelling what do we do when we disagree with an issue, when we come into life. And then lastly, a search for compassion and integrity. I don't need to tell you that the Christian track record of handling people who are different to us is quite poor, and some of those issues we're still learning. Some of those issues our churches are still struggling to work out how do we bring that person in, if only for them to hear the truth and so that we can love them well. But even once they're in as a Christian,